This is a very interesting book, Surviving Off-Grid. And the reason I picked the book up is because if any of you have watched this channel, you know I'm very much about decolonization, you know, anti-colonialism, anti-colonial powers, things like that. And I caught, the book caught my eye because it says Surviving Off-Grid, Decolonizing the Industrial Mind, which is something that we have to really grapple with in this time, because we're living in a time of mass industrialization. Everything is happening at rapid speed as far as the earth is changing. They're trying to take us into an age where we're very much disconnected from the land, disconnected from how to even, you know, from our food. We're disconnected from all of these things, and instead we're living in concrete jungles, unable to go back to what that was, you know, and we miss out on a lot of things that we don't know that we're missing out on. So the book caught my attention because of that title. Now, let me say, it's not exactly how I thought it was, the book. It's not I would say y'all should honestly take out the word decolonize from this book, because it's really not a decolonized manifesto. It's really a manifesto that I would say, leave the system and leave the system's ways. And don't be caught up inside of this idea that you can't do for yourself, because if anything, that's exactly what the elites are looking for. They're looking for you to think, I can't filter my own water. I have to get water from you. Or, I can't make my own baby food. You know, I need to go to the store to do it. Like, they really rely on us having those types of mentalities, because that's going to be of use to them in the end, particularly as the ages draw to an end. So we're going to read from parts of this book. And with any book that I read on this channel, particularly from now on, it's not necessarily because I agree with everything that the author's talking about or for what they stand for. I'm in a place right now where I'm able to listen to people I disagree with on some certain things, for the knowledge that they do have, understanding that I even disagree with myself oftentimes, especially my old videos, for example. I might disagree with like 75% of what I'm saying at certain times, because we always are evolving. So if you do pick up the book and you read it and you're like, did Tierney really reference this book? It's a good book, but there's things in there that you might not like, and I think I'll touch on the inside of, you know, subsequent sessions. I'm not going to read from the book in every single time we do this session, but for today, I think this particular part is a very good introduction to understand why those of us who are in the West, or even if you're not in the West, but you're living like you're in the West, why we have to take it upon ourselves to seriously remove ourselves from the ways of this system and have a real self-sufficient mindset. So with that, I'm going to start reading from the book. All right, so this is a long segment we're going to go through, or long pages I have to read. So I'll give you some visuals as we read through it, but do pay attention to what I'm saying and honestly draw parallels to America. Right now we're about to talk about Rome, and Rome is very significant as far as a teller of where America is going, because Rome already did it. Rome was already a world global empire. Rome already was the top-notch nation in the world. Rome already had a lock on so many parts of society, and yet they fell. And as I said in the introductory, I'll keep saying the introductory video, and I'll keep saying this: America is on the verge of falling. So Rome, not just from this type of mindset, but also from a spiritual context, Rome literally is America. And actually, in the last segment today, we're going to get more into that. So let's read. If you pay attention to the news, there seems to be much trepidation and worry in the world today. Western civilization looks to be coming apart at the seams. Economies around the world are crashing. There are massive job layoffs. This is literally the news today, right? And bank failures. Literally the news today. And governments are printing and spending trillions of pretend dollars to try to stem the tide of collapse. Again, literally today. There is a palpable nervousness in the air, and it seems that most people are just trying to pretend as if nothing permanently serious is going on. For over a century, the Western democracies have seen unprecedented growth and relative success and have been the envy of the whole world when it comes to standard of living. Now, if one dares look closely, it appears that there is a change coming, and that change is making a lot of people really nervous. Now, we're going to jump around a little bit, so we're going to go into this next section, talking about urbanism, suburbanism in the modern Rome. Towards the end of the 1st century, Rome, the capital city of the Western Roman Empire, was a metropolis of more than 1 million inhabitants. Most of the citizens of Rome were purely urbanites, people who had never known any other life and whose families and households had lived in the city for generations. The agrarian skills and trades that had allowed people to survive and thrive for thousands of years around the world had been almost completely lost by the city folk in Rome. And much like today, city dwellers looked down their noses and sneered at people who actually had or chose to work in the soil with their hands to provide the necessities of survival. I'm just going to take a very quick second to say that this is literally today. And I'll say particularly, I noticed this mentality as far as looking down on people who are actually working the soil, people who are actually connected to the land, and instead basically looking at urban society as this is what life should be. This really much reminds me of a lot of the mentalities over here in Africa, because a lot of people don't want to live in the bush. A lot of people don't want to live out of the urban areas for good reason sometimes. I mean, there are some things that are understandable. Obviously, it's very difficult as far as amenities and things like that. But the idea that you're superior to those who live out in basically or working the soil, who have connection to the soil, who are more living an agrarian lifestyle, that belief, I believe, is really misplaced. And we're going to talk about that some more. So Romans took to city life like a fish to water. People who arrived in Rome from the country or from the provinces were considered to be backward bumpkins compared to the cosmopolitan and progressive people of the eternal city. Do you think of Rome as an ancient and an unrefined city? Are you one of those who think that because something existed long ago, it cannot have been better than what exists today? Meaning, are you of the impression that when you think of Rome, that today's society is way more advanced and doing better off? Well, the city of Rome, if you did not know, had running water, a sewage system, baths, mausoleums, temples, nightclubs, restaurants, pubs, shops, and even shopping malls. Did not know that. Many of the homes had air conditioning in ancient Rome, milk delivery, and indoor plumbing. Students attended the city's many schools and universities. Writers and artists worked by commission for religious leaders, politicians, and wealthier citizens. Specialization thrived. The Roman urbanites became bees in a massive hive. Most of the residents lived in apartments, walked to their jobs on cobblestone and brick streets lined with flowers, topiary, and lived their whole lives within the boundaries of the city. Many Romans never even seen a farm, nor did they possess any practical agrarian survival skills. Like the Greeks before them, they did their jobs, consumed, lived, and they let the government and the merchants mine the future. What could go wrong? Most of the citizens of Rome were employed in jobs that were made necessary by the massive amount of consumption by the citizens of the city. So familiar. It was not uncommon for a wealthy Roman citizen to employ as many as 50 full-time paid workers, some whose day might consist solely of polishing candlesticks or sweeping floors or carrying things from one place to another. Others worked in factories, shops, thermal bathhouses, restaurants, accounting offices, and in the business trades, or in the city's many ventures of entertainment. Constant wars and conquests provided the means for a constant inflow of money and material for expansion for the maintenance of jobs and a stable economy. Whereas the Greeks had built their prosperity on Mediterranean trade via its vast network of foreign colonies and trading partners. The Romans supported their economy by conquest and the sword. Again, Rome is America. It is true that Rome had massive slums, okay, areas of poverty and degradation inhabited mainly by slaves and the poorer classes, but it also had a very wealthy districts with upscale shops and boutiques. The Romans, after centuries of living the urban life, had little or no concept of how their food was grown or produced. Ask yourself, do you know how your food is grown, or do you know how your food is produced? If you ask a Roman how sustainable his existence was, he might reply, Rome is the eternal city. It has always been here. It will always be here. Whatever I will ever need is available in the shops and in the stores. You have to admit, seeing Rome would have been something to behold. If you asked the same Roman citizen from whence his water came, he would have likely shrugged and pointed to the aqueducts. To the Roman, it seemed that freely accessible and plentiful water had always just been there. 11 towering aqueducts, technological marvels built over a span of more than 500 years, brought cool, clear, portable water into the city from dozens of miles away. Underground pipes brought running water into and provided air conditioning for the houses of those able to afford it. Huge buildings and structures built by both paid and slave labor moved over the city streets. The imposing Roman Colosseum, capable of seating 50,000 spectators, was a marvel of engineering and construction. The Colosseum, for over 300 years, was the site of gladiatorial contests, executions, animal hunts, savage battles, and other public spectacles. And this, I've always felt personally that we should have a similar view of how we look at the sports arena. I'm not going to comment anyone who watches sports, but me personally, especially something like football or boxing and UFC, why is it that we become distracted by so much violence? Why is it that these things that really are physical and can literally kill someone, right, is what can occupy so much of our interest inside of today's society? We see the same thing was the case in the Roman society. These Colosseums, we might look at it as so barbaric, but listen, that was entertainment. That was literally what they did to pass time. That's literally how they forgot about their cares in the world. And so I'd encourage you to consider why that might have been. Now, the Colosseum, in a marvel of engineering that matches anything done in entertainment today, right? The Colosseum could even be filled with water for staged mock sea battles with full-size ships complete with crews. Construction was a way of life in Rome. And much like in our present cities, construction meant jobs, and it gave a sense that things were always going to get bigger and better, right? But at the turn of the 5th century, even though the Romans did not know it and could not have conceived it, emphasized they didn't know it and they couldn't have possibly foresaw it. The end was very, very near. The thought of disaster would have seemed implausible to a Roman. Rome had not fallen to any enemy or army in 800 years. And think about how long that is. Keep in mind, America is, I think like 200 something years old. Even the colonies of America are over 400 years old. Rome had not fallen to an enemy for 800 years by the time that it was about to fall. And even though cultural and social memories and historical awareness were much greater back then, it seemed as if Rome, the eternal city, would indeed continue on for centuries more. The Roman juggernaut was both hated and feared by friends and neighbors alike for hundreds of years, and it could be said that, much like America in the 21st century, world opinion had ceased to be favorable for the lone Western superpower. And I don't know if y'all know this, but more now than ever, America is really not liked outside of, even like in places like Europe. If you pay attention to what people are saying, let's say the Nord Stream pipeline, for example, which all evidence points to it was the United States that blew up the pipeline. Europeans were very rightfully pissed at America. A lot of Europeans are pissed at America basically being the one who's calling the shots, and NATO nations are just complying without actually doing things in the interest of their people. So America is not just hated by, we were told growing up that, oh, they hate you for your freedoms, which is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. But they hate you for your freedoms. They hate you because you're free and, you have a good life. That's why they hate you. And, come to find out that those same nations that they were talking about were the nations that America pillaged, the nations that America conquered or overthrew legitimate governments. Like, these were the nations that supposedly just hated us for our freedoms, right? So it's important for us to know that the same thing is happening, today, not just with people who are supposedly against America, but literally people who we associate with being allies, or countries that are associated with being allies of America. America is not very well liked right now, and so that's something to keep in mind when you look at Rome. Now, by the end of the 4th century, many of the barbarian tribes had begun to unite against the domination of Rome. The Visigoths had moved into the Eastern Roman Empire to escape persecution and subjugation by the invading Huns. Led by Alaric, the Visigoths and other barbarian tribes now found themselves subjects of Rome, and from the Romans they suffered from persecution, high taxes, government intervention, and corruption and forced conscription. Uniting together against Rome, the barbarian armies on several occasions besieged Rome, and in the year 410, the Eternal City, yeah, right, like the Titanic, it was never going to sink. The Eternal City, that shining, wicked, prosperous, arrogant city that sits on 7 hills, that is prophecy if you don't know. It fell to barbarian hordes. The destruction of Rome was unthinkable, but the unthinkable happened. Rome indeed fell. Most of the people starved, died of disease, or were killed during the siege. But hundreds of thousands of refugees fled into the countryside as Rome was sacked and burned. That's right, Rome, the city that was going to last forever, the empire that would last forever. Not only did the empire end, but the city was literally sacked and burned, destroyed, killing many, if not most, of its citizens. So what was life like in the city before the fall? During the sieges of Rome by Alaric, there were 3 in all. Starvation and disease killed tens of thousands of people. And the city descended into a maelstrom of bloody violence, robbery, and even cannibalism. That's correct. Rome fell to the point where people started eating each other. The Roman leaders continued to hold spectacles and gladiatorial battles during the siege in order to keep people's mind off of miserable conditions. Let me read this thing again. The Roman leaders continued to hold spectacles and gladiatorial battles during the siege in order to keep people's minds off of their miserable conditions. So don't think that while America's falling and your favorite football team is going to the Super Bowl, or your favorite fighter is doing this, your favorite basketball player is doing this, and so that must mean everything's fine. No. Sports are literally distractions. I mean, that's one reason I can't get into them. I can't put my mind on a fake or a battle between 2 teams that none of it affects my life. It's literally a distraction. And again, just letting you know that that's something that will keep going until the wheels fall off and it can't go on anymore. So don't think that because you're still being entertained that means that the system is not coming to an end. So what else was happening in America before the fall? Instead of being satisfied with the destruction, death, and dismemberment of criminals, slaves, and political and religious prisoners, the people demanded that the bodies of the dead be given to them for their meat. That's right. That's how bad things were. At the Colosseum, you have people fighting, people dying, people were actually eating those dead bodies. That's how bad things were. Now, one absolutely certain that nothing could go wrong, and looking down on those who made their productive living from soil, because remember, those people in Rome, they weren't connected to the soil. When the means of production and distribution of mass-produced goods were destroyed, the people became animals. They died like animals or became the food for animals and men. Europe now descended into a period that is in our days called the Dark Ages, because for some reason, whenever Europe goes through something, the whole world supposedly goes through it at the same time, they say. It was indeed dark, not because Rome had been some kind of beacon or shining light. In fact, Rome had always been morally dark, brutal, and nasty, bloodthirsty, and murderous, which you have to appreciate. People don't want to talk about. Rome was always a very dark place. It was always a place built on bloodshed, built on killings, built on destruction. So the fall of Rome should be of no sadness to us. And the same thing when this place or that place, I'm no longer there physically, but the American Empire, when that empire falls, don't feel bad for it, because the empire began in bloodshed, which is why it must end in bloodshed. The technological feat that was classical Rome was actually a huge deception, a monstrous hologram of success and achievement. Let me say that again in case you didn't catch it. The technological feature that was classical Rome was actually a huge deception, a monstrous hologram of success and achievement. Rome was a city powered by human blood, coercion, and foreign domination, as any huge city or state must be. The success of Roman life came on the backs of slaves and conquered people, and was upheld by the crushing tyranny and the usurpation of God-given freedoms. Like in any other metropolis, the maintenance of the city of Rome required massive amount of taxes and human investment. True wealth, created by the hard work and creativity of productive people who tilled, planted, harvested, milled, mined, constructed, etc., was expropriated at the point of the sword and by threats and very real violence. Taxes, as they were in any nation, were acquired in myriad ways, but all of those ways rested on a threat of imprisonment, death, or worse, the Colosseum. In a sublime irony, the so-called advancements of Rome, those accomplishments that allowed hundreds of thousands of people to live in an artificially built and unsustainable society, artificially built, separated from the means of production, actually served to cripple and mentally enslave the people who became addicted to city and suburban life. People moved out of the countryside and into cities and the suburbs for many reasons, but most went to Rome because, and then it goes into a number of reasons. Briefly, agrarian life became too difficult for them because, let's be real, living off the grid or living in a self-sustaining life takes physical work. And, that's something that some people are afraid of. Rome had become a mythic status, meaning like, have you ever heard the land of the free and the home of the brave? Well, that was also Rome. Rome was this mystic place. Like, oh my gosh, Rome, I'm in Rome. I can't leave Rome. Why would I leave Rome? That was the same thing that they were doing back then. And the other last reason he gives is greed and covetousness. And we know that that is American society, literally. So I hope this was a good setup for the whole purpose of this segment, because I want you to understand that if you do not feel an urgency to be living a self-sustaining or set-apart lifestyle, now is the time. Understand that you might not feel like America's coming to an end. You might not feel like Europe's coming to an end. Or even if you're living inside of the industrialized parts of the global south, you might not feel like the city of Nairobi, or you might not feel like the city of Rio de Janeiro, wherever you are. You might not feel like that lifestyle is coming to an end, but it very much could, and for certain places, it is coming to an end. And for that reason, you're not supposed to be depending on a system that you know is going to meet an eventual doom. And that is where America is going. So, are you like the Romans? Honestly, have some time to evaluate that and think to yourself. When you think about the people who were just living completely oblivious to what was happening in the world system, completely oblivious to the fact that their way of living and their means of living was coming to an end. Is that you right now? And if that is you, I just encourage you, listen, have a real moment of clarity where you're like, listen, I'm not going to put my faith inside of a system. If anything, I'll put my faith in Yah, because that is the only thing that's going to sustain me. That means understanding the ways that you live that do not comport with that have to come to an end if you're going to move into a place of being able to do for self truly. So that is the first part of this segment of Set Apart. Next time might be a little lighter. Maybe we'll get into some concrete examples of things that you can do, some examples of things that I'm trying to do. But this is the first segment, an introductory message. Definitely take some time to think back about it. And again, if you do want the book, it's called Surviving Off-Grid by Michael Bunker. I don't endorse everything in this book, but good information. And honestly, I think that you would benefit from taking time to think through